Hi gang, welcome to Ask Mark, our scuba diving Q&A. If you have any scuba diving questions, by all means pop them down in the comment section underneath this video. And if you use the Ask Mark hashtag, it gets yourself and your question featured in an upcoming Q&A. Today I'm answering a question from Joseph Dracula about separate low pressure inflator hoses for DSMBs. Joseph says, hello Mark, I was wondering if you think it's okay to have a separate hose, low pressure hose, to have just for the DSMB to inflate it, as so not to fumble around trying to reconnect to the BCD. What are your thoughts? So some scuba divers do dive with an extra low pressure inflator hose, usually routed down next to their inflator, to actually inflate a DSMB without needing to disconnect your actual inflator and then reconnect it. The only issue that I can think of is maybe contaminants and failure points. So contaminants getting inside of the end of just the inflator hose, so that needs a good thorough wash between dives. But a lot of divers dive with an actual inflator nozzle. That's do I have one? No, that one will do. So if you're diving just with a bare low pressure inflator hose, that has a Schrader valve on the inside. So even when there's pressure inside of it, it shouldn't allow gas to escape. When they get a bit old and when they either harden or the seal itself starts to wear out, you can get some bubbling out of that, but it's not usually too much. Just bare in the water like this, yeah, you might get some contaminants, some like salt crystal buildup or something on the inside, maybe even verdigris if you don't clean it thoroughly. So it's worth washing that out very, very thoroughly if it's not actually connected to your BCD inflator. Otherwise, what some divers used to do is, if you ignore the one for inflating car tires, you'd have an actual inflator nozzle which has the same fitting as your BCD, and that would be connected, not usually this style because these tend to go off by themselves. I used to have a brass one somewhere, but I must have put it somewhere. And that would be useful for like lift bags and DSMBs, but more open bottomed ones, so that instead of using your primary or your octo, because a lot of divers, especially in colder waters, if you're inflating a DSMB or a lift bag, you don't really want to use your second stage upturned, because if you press that purge button in cold water, chances are it's just going to free flow, and then trying to stop it becomes an issue. You don't have that much control. So divers would dive with an extra low pressure inflator hose with some kind of control mechanism, and with this one you just bend it and that would inflate it. That would kind of go over your left hand shoulder or however you have it routed, but I've seen divers especially have it there because it's quite convenient right next to your inflator, and yeah, just kind of inflate it using one of those. But with modern DSMBs and lift bags, actually, they tend to have the same inflator nozzle, just without the locking mechanism, so that you can inflate it just using an inflator hose. And without the locking mechanism means that when you push it on, it doesn't click into position, so you're now physically attached to the lift bag that you're now filling with air, and that's going to float up to the surface. It'll just slide straight off. But yeah, just instead of having to disconnect your BCD inflator and then reconnect it between dives, because it can be a little bit tricky. Some people do struggle with disconnecting it. And then reconnecting it, if you do it with a dry suit, it actually shoots a little bit of water into your chest, which I've experienced firsthand. Not the nicest thing, but yeah, there's not a huge issue of diving with an extra low pressure inflator hose, except it does add extra failure points, so extra O-rings that could go wrong. There's extra hoses that just extra things to consider, whereas if you've got one fewer hose, you know that's for your inflator or whatever it is, just an extra hose to consider. Something else worth considering, I think that's actually in my dry suit bag, is that not all inflators or inflator hoses have the same like collar. Some are like specially oversized just to make your life a little bit easier. So my dry suit one does have a very large collar on it, because dry suit diving is meant to be used in colder waters, which you typically have gloves, so you don't have the dexterity to do with a smaller collar. So that might be an option for you to reduce having to invest in an extra hose and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, maybe get an actual inflator hose for your BCD that has an easier to use knuckle on it or something. So that's a choice, but otherwise, yeah, there's not a huge issue with diving with a blank low pressure inflator hose.